Hey folks, it's Jeff Gotthelf, and I realized that even though we've been talking about it for a long time, this concept of objectives and key results based roadmaps, I haven't actually shared a how-to video on it. There's a blog post on it on my blog, but somebody asked me the other day if I had an example of an OKR based roadmap, and I realized I didn't. So I'm making this video to go through the process to show you how to make an OKR based roadmap. And so we're going to jump right into that. I'm going to go quickly through what are OKRs, just very, very quickly, literally, because it's not really the point of this video, and we're going to jump to road mapping very quickly. All right, so let's do that really quick. So if we go to what are OKRs, very quickly, OKRs are a goal-setting framework for teams, and there are a variety of ways to get to good OKRs, but one of the ways that you might want to do that is to align them to your strategy. And again, I'm not getting into this too heavily. We have a lean strategy canvas over at senseandrespond.co. It's part of the lean product canvas, but it's a nice way to ground your team in a very quick assessment of what your strategy might be so that you can start to set goals. So in this particular case, an organization might have an overall goal of being known as the easiest bank to transact with in a B2B and a B2C markets. But what's getting in the way is regulations, know your customer, and anti-money laundering, and a variety of other things that make it difficult for banks to create easy-to-use experiences. And so strategically, the bank is going to focus initially on consumer banking in the US, and they're going to focus specifically on tech-savvy bankers. And ideally, they will win that market by being the easiest digital bank to use by taking advantage of the latest technologies. Not so long. There's a whole other set of videos that we can do about how to get to strategy using Roger Martin's "Where Will You Play and How Will You Win" ideas. Not the purpose of this video, so if you want to see that, just let me know in the comments. I'm happy to create a video for that. But based on that goal, we can now start to talk about what are our objectives and key results. How will we know that we're achieving this particular strategy? So if we think about that, right, it's worthwhile to explain, first of all, what is an OKR? An OKR, as I mentioned, is a goal-setting framework for teams that focuses on delivering and measuring customer value rather than measuring the delivery of output or completing a task or launching a campaign or anything along those lines. We're looking for a meaningful change in the behavior of the people that we serve. And when you break it down into its component parts, an objective is the qualitative future state that we want to create for our customers. So if we achieve our strategy and solve problems for our customers, what does that world look like? And ideally, it's inspirational and it's aspirational. This is the why behind the work. It gets our teams behind that. And key results, they measure whether or not we're achieving that objective. It's the quantitative side of the conversation. And these measures tell us how well, or not well, for that matter, are we headed towards our objective. And the thing that makes this different and powerful and also difficult is that your key results must be outcomes. This is where things get interesting. And outcomes are measures of human behavior. And specifically, they're measures of human behavior that drive business results. And so those humans are going to be your users or your customers, anybody that consumes the thing that you make at work. So if you make things directly for end consumers, those are the people whose behavior you want to change. But if you make something that's consumed by a third-party vendor for your organization or another team or colleagues in your company, those are the humans whose behavior you want to change. We call them customers in the book, but ultimately, you know that you've written a human-centric, customer-centric key result when it answers the question, who does what by how much? There always should be a person, right, or a persona, if you will, an action that we want them to take, and then how much we want them to increase or decrease that specific action. And that's how we know that we've written a customer-centric key result. Now you'll notice that what's missing from this conversation is any discussion of features, solutions, or activities, or tasks. We're moving away from a commitment to fixed time and fixed scope initiatives, and instead we're focusing on measuring value by seeing how the behavior of our customers change, right? And so what does a good OKR look like? It could look like this, right? This is an example, and I think it's a good OKR because I wrote it. So hopefully you think the same, right? But for that example that I had above, the objective could be the easiest and most secure way to authenticate into your bank account by Q3. And the way that we know that that's happening, the key results could be that existing customers successfully sign in 98% of the time, right? Who does what by how much? Existing customers who successfully sign in, does what by how much? 98% of the time. Another key result could be existing customers request their passwords 75% less often. Again, who does what by how much? And you'll notice that I don't talk about how we will achieve this. That's the part that's missing from a good OKR statement. And by leaving that out, right, we are ensuring that our teams go out into the world and discover the best combination of code, copy, and design, and business model, and pricing model, and value proposition that's going to drive the behavior change that we're looking for in our customers and in our users. And in doing so, right, we actually start to measure whether or not we've delivered real value, and we're collecting evidence that justifies any course correction along the way if we realize that we're not working on the right ideas because they're not changing behavior in the same way. Now, without any solutions or products or features or any kind of output in the goal statement, the question around roadmaps becomes interesting, right? Because inevitably, product managers are going to be asked for a roadmap. They're going to be asked for dates, and they're going to be asked for progress, and they're going to be asked for features, and what are we building, and when will it be ready, and that type of thing. And if our commitments are to key results, to changes in human behavior, what does a roadmap look like? Well, to get there, one of the first things that we actually have to do is we have to come up with hypotheses, right? So hypotheses are the proposed solutions that we have that we think are going to drive the behavior change that we're looking for. And the nice thing about hypotheses is it takes all the feature ideas that we have, or the feature ideas that we've been given by the people that we work for, and we connect them as part of the hypothesis statement to a key result. So this is the hypothesis template that we use all the time, and it starts off with the words: we believe that a 75% reduction in password requests from existing customers, that's our key result, remember, right, will be achieved if online banking customers, that's our persona, attain an easier access to their banking needs, that's the benefit that they get out of it, with iScan authentication via webcam. That's the feature that we want to build for these folks. So now somebody either told us to do that, or we've decided that that's a good idea, but instead of just going out and building it, we're saying, look, this is an interesting idea. We're going to connect it to a specific customer, to a benefit for that customer, and then ultimately to a key result. Now, the interesting thing is we're going to have a lot more than just one hypothesis. And these become, or they start to become, the building blocks of our OKR-based roadmap. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you a template for an OKR-based roadmap, and I'll walk through the component parts very quickly, and then we'll start to build one using this example, so hopefully you get a sense of what a completed one looks like. So if we go over here, right, we kind of zoom in on this. This is what at least one version of an OKR-based roadmap could look like, okay? Now, the idea here is that we take the objective and we put it at the top, and that's going to be our longer term strategic theme. Right? So we have OKRs. So we're going to pull out that objective and set it at the top. That's the thing we're going to work on. Then on a quarterly basis, and I'm using quarters because they're common and they're familiar and it's shorter than a year, but anything, the time box here needs to make sense for your industry or your context, but try to make it shorter than your current planning cycle, right? We want to get feedback a lot sooner. And so on a quarterly basis, we are going to commit to specific key results. We're going to pull those key results out of our OKR statement, and we're going to line them up across the quarters. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to hit a key result at the end of every quarter. We could have a key result that is the goal for Q1 and Q2, or maybe even Q3, or maybe we have the same key results in Q2 and Q3, etc. All this stuff can move forward. Now, below that, we have our hypotheses, right? These are our best guesses about what we might build to hit those OKR goals, right? What are the things that we might make that will change customer behavior in the way that we've predicted in our key result goals? And now that is what we've committed to for the quarter. And we're going to list those hypotheses and those features in each one of these quarter columns. Now, below that, you'll notice that we've got this category called discovery questions. Discovery questions are the things we don't know, or the things that we need to find out about the work that we're planning on doing in this quarter. Now, they could be directly tied to a hypothesis, to the risks in that hypothesis. They could be tied to the key result goal, right? It could be something like, well, we're not sure if people want this feature. We're not sure we can develop this feature successfully. We're not sure why people behave a certain way that would drive us to build a specific feature. Or it could be discovery questions around, we're not sure this is the right behavior change to chase at all. This is our assumption. We need to figure that out. Are we solving the right problem? Right? These are the kinds of questions we want to put into our roadmap as well. Now, that may sound strange or uncommon, but in this particular case, the reason that we put that there is because those questions exist. Right? There is a level of uncertainty in digital product development that is just inherent in the medium. And if we pretend that these risks, that these questions don't exist, we just build stuff and we hope that it works. And I know that's how a lot of organizations work. But when we start to visualize those questions on the roadmap, inevitably someone is going to ask you, hey, what are we doing about that discovery question that says, we don't know if this is the right behavior change? I'm glad you asked. We have to do some discovery work, some experimentation, some learning, some proof of concept, talk to customers, right? Whatever it is that we need to do. And so all of a sudden, we're starting to visualize not only the stuff that we're going to build, but the work that we actually need to do to figure out if this is the right thing to build and how to build it correctly, right? So we're building that into it. Now, you'll notice as the roadmap goes out over time, there are fewer and fewer and fewer things we may build, fewer and fewer hypotheses. And the reality is that the further out in time that we look, the less accurately we can predict what we're going to be working on. So we have fewer guesses, right? The level of confidence that we have in these ideas moving forward drops significantly, right? So maybe for the next quarter, you have a pretty good sense of what you're going to be building. And maybe in Q2, you have some idea as well. But looking 6, 9, 12 months into the future and trying to figure out exactly what you're going to be working on at that time frame, people may ask you to do that, but realistically, there's very little confidence in that. And so we're not going to put that into our roadmap, right? That's why I've got this guy kind of like holding his hands up like this in Q4, right? Because we have no idea what we're going to be working on in the future, right? Now, if you're forced to actually put in features in every single quarter, Q2, Q3, Q4, going forward, you might want to use this template and just adjust it by putting confidence levels with each of these ideas. And as you go further out in time, that confidence level should drop significantly to 0, honestly, if you're looking anything more than 9 months ahead. We just can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen. Now, look, that's going to put a lot of anxiety on your stakeholders and on your managers. They're going to say, well, how can I tell people what's happening? What the sales team needs to know? And so we're going to alleviate some of that anxiety by doing these quarterly check-ins. And every quarter we get together as a team with our stakeholders and we talk about the key result. Does it still make sense? How are we tracking towards that key result? Right? Are we making progress? Right? What have we learned along the way? What have we shipped along the way? What do we decide not to ship? What new ideas have come up that we may want to build? And what do we plan on doing in the next quarter? And so at every one of these quarterly check-ins, we're taking all the data and all the insight and all the evidence that we've collected doing work over the last 3 months, including the discovery work, right, that builds the evidence and the insight and the data, both qualitative and quantitative, and we're making decisions about the next 2 quarters. So this is a living document, whereas traditional roadmaps usually are fixed because we spend so much time negotiating them and committing to dates and ROI commitments and all that stuff. In this case, we're saying, look, this is our best guess based on what we know today. We've got roughly a 2-quarter planning window that we have some decent level of confidence in. And then at the end of every quarter, we use that evidence to move that planning window forward 3 months and to use that evidence to make better decisions about the next quarter and the quarter after that, right? And along the way, we're continuing to do that discovery work. So that's kind of the overall idea here in this case. Now let's put it to use. Let me show you what it looks like when we actually put it to use, right? So I showed you this OKR before, right? The easiest and most secure way to authenticate into your bank account by Q3. That's our objective. And we've got 2 key results to match that about successful sign-ons and password requests. Now, in addition to that, I showed you that we had a hypothesis that we had written, and certainly we're going to have a lot more hypotheses that will help us potentially achieve these particular goals. Now, down here, I've created a blank version of the roadmap itself, and I want to show you how to fill this out. So let's do that. We're going to start with the objective at the top, and I'm just going to copy and paste that objective. Oh, it's stuck back here. Let me just move it here and move it to the front. In some magical way. Where did it go? It's there. I don't know how to move it out of here. Okay, well, sorry for my I'm just gonna, there we go. I got it here now. Okay, so this is our objective, and it's our goal for the foreseeable future of this team, right? So we're going to put it here in our objective row, which is the easiest and most secure way to authenticate into your bank account by Q3. That's the goal. This is what this team is focused on. Now look, on a quarterly basis, we are going to commit to a couple of, we're going to commit to some key results. Now for this example, we only have 2. But it doesn't mean that we only work towards 2 key results, but it's good. It's actually good to have 2. So if I had to sequence these, right? So the first question is, how do we sequence these key results? I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that folks don't need to request their passwords, right? So I think the first key result is working on existing customers and not having to request their passwords, at least 75% fewer times. That's the first thing we're going to work on. And I think we can take that on in Q1. That's our first goal. Now, realistically, I don't know if we're going to get to 75% in Q1. So I think that's likely going to move over into Q2 as well. At least that's my estimate right now. I'll make that a little smaller. And then I think if we can make that happen, we can start to focus on getting folks into the system 98% of the time as well. I think that's important, so we'll do that, and I suspect that will drag into Q3 as well, so we'll put that there, and I honestly don't know what the goal is going to be in Q4 just yet, but realistically, if we look at our planning cycles, this is where I think we're going to be right now. So let me actually get this thing out of the way so you can see it. So far, what have we done? We've just literally just distributed our objective and key results, but we've started to take a logical look at our key results about how to sequence them. So we've sequenced them, right? Now, the next question, the next conversation we want to have as a team is, well, what are we going to work on, right? That's the big question. So at the very least, we know that we've got this one, which I will somehow bring to the front here in just a second. There we go. Okay, so at the very least, I know we've got this hypothesis here, the one that we talked about, the eye scanning with webcam. So that's going to be at least one of the hypotheses we're going to work on this in Q1. And then look, realistically, right, I know that we're going to have a lot more ideas than that. Realistically, when do we ever find ourselves with too little work to do? We're going to have a lot of stuff to build. As we look at our backlog of features, we now need to decide where those features are going to go. And the way that we decide is based on the key results that we've committed to for that quarter. So we may have some ideas in our backlog that we think are going to help us with the password reset request. So we've got a hypothesis there and another one there, and maybe we've got a third one here. But maybe there's something in our backlog as well that we think is actually going to help us drive folks to authenticate successfully, but it's not related to password requests. So we're gonna start to look to put that out into Q2. So as we look at our backlog, we start to filter it in time based on the key result that we've got in that quarter. If you think about the key result, if you think about the quarter, right, as a column of work, as a backlog of work, sitting on top of that column of work is this key result filter. And everything that goes into that quarter, you have to confidently be able to say, yes, I think that's going to help us drive this particular key result that we're looking for. So we're distributing this work over time that way, and then realistically out in Q4, we have no idea what we're going to be doing, and probably not in Q3 as well. So we start to build that out. Now, there's this thing down here about discovery questions, right? We talked about these discovery questions, and this becomes really interesting because this is new. You don't really see this in roadmaps that much, right? And this is really where we get into the risks of the work that we're planning on doing in this case, because we want to do the discovery work as well as the delivery work, right? So what are some of the discovery questions or the risks that we might have to figure out as part of this work? Well, first of all, we have to figure out, why do people request their passwords so often, right? Why is that even happening in the first place? I think that's a discovery question we need to figure out, right? So at the very least, we need to do that. When it comes to our eye scanning authentication idea with the webcam, is webcam eye scan, high res enough, for example, right? That's a feature we could put in there. We could look at simple desirability things like, will people actually scan their eye using their webcam? Right? This is the kind of stuff that we're looking for in here. And as we start to identify these uncertainties, these risks in our work, we start to figure out whether or not we start to visualize the risk in the work and the risk towards achieving these targets. And that's our goal with each one of these, right? As we look out into the future, right? We've got some ideas here. Realistically, we have a lot less work here, so there might only be 1 or 2 discovery questions already set up for Q2, and then we work our way through time like this, right? We take our features, we filter them by key results, and then we write down these discovery questions to make sure that the uncertainties are clear, the confidence, the risks to actually achieving this are clear, and so that we can actually justify doing the discovery work when the time comes to work in this particular way. And so that's roughly what this looks like and how to use this as you move this forward, right? We started with the template here, but realistically, right, we need it to look like this with actual features. And then every quarter we get together, we talk about what we learned, and we adjust our planning in these 2-quarter cycles moving forward, and we communicate our changes as we go ahead. So that's roughly how to use this. That was very, very quick, I know, and I spoke very quickly as well. I appreciate you tuning in and listening. If you've got questions, you can put them in the comments. You can email me directly. That's my email on the screen. If you've not read our book, Who Does What by How Much, that's the QR code to get it. You can grab it on Amazon. I highly recommend it. If you have read it and you can write us a review, I'd be super grateful. We're also scaling our training business at Sense and Respond Learning. That's Josh Seiden and I. And if you're interested in becoming a training partner with us, please reach out and let us know. We do have a webinar coming up on May 27th, 2025, about OKRs and performance management, which is actually a really tricky topic. So we hope to see you there. That's the QR code for that. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks very much.